For the purpose of today's class, we will be bringing finality to the strategy that we have learned how to formulate and implement by checking the extent to which the strategy is successfully working as it was planned to work. So we will be looking at strategy evaluation or strategy monitoring. And by the end of this lecture, the thematic areas that we anticipate to tackle include the ones that we have on our screen. So strategy evaluation. Strategy evaluation can be simply explained as the process or actions that are used in assessing the efficacy or effectiveness of a chosen strategy in achieving an organization's objectives. To what extent is the strategy that has been rolled out to help us achieve an organization's long-term aspirations, yielding fruitful results? So if we say we are conducting a strategy evaluation, it simply means that we are assessing a given strategy to verify whether it is in line with the intended plan that the organization strives to implement, or it is deviating from it. Hello, Grace.
Hello, sir. Please, this Rita is Sojo.
Okay, Rita. So strategy evaluation, as I indicated, simply refers to the attempt that is made to assess or appraise a given strategy to verify whether it is successfully assisting an organization to achieve its objectives or it is falling short in that pursuit. And that will mean that it will be important to compare the current performance of the organization with the standards that were prior to the implementation set. And when these comparisons are made and you're able to identify some variances or discrepancies, then it will help you to know whether the strategy is working or not. So anytime an attempt is made to assess a given strategy in terms of its efficacy in this regard, then we are dealing with strategy evaluation. Generally speaking, strategy evaluation is said to be a vital tool that can help an organization improve its well-being. In that when it is timely done, it is able to alert management and other decision makers about some possible problems or potential problems that are confronting an organization's activities. And corrective actions can be taken in due course to remedy or salvage the organization from going into abyss. The goal of strategy evaluation is therefore to ensure that an organization's chosen strategy continues to be relevant, taking cognizance of the changes that are occurring outside the business environment and the changes that are also occurring within the business environment. So if you do a comparative analysis of these forces outside and within an organization, and you realize that the prevailing strategy is not in a good position to help the organization succeed, then it can quickly inform management to address the challenges. For that reason, we can discern that strategy evaluation helps in making informed decisions about whether to continue with the current strategy or to modify it, or sometimes just drop it and switch to your contingent plan that was also created in the course of strategy formulation. Every strategy evaluation activity or process strives to accomplish three main activities. So anytime a careful attempt is made to evaluate a current strategy that is in place in an organization, the focal point is to accomplish three main activities. And the first one is that it strives to examine the underlying basis of a firm's strategy. So when we say strategy evaluation attempts to examine the underlying basis of a firm's strategy, it means that during the evaluation process, an attempt is made to analyze and appreciate or understand the foundational elements which informed the formulation and implementation of the strategy. And this may include re-examining the company's mission and vision, the strategic objectives that it is aspiring to achieve, the competitive advantage that it intends to achieve, the economic conditions, technological conditions, and all these other factors which informed the formulation of the strategy. So when we are evaluating a given strategy, an attempt is made to verify whether all these precursors to the formulation and the determination of a given strategy are still relevant to the strategy that has been implemented. The second activity that any strategic evaluation pursuit strives to accomplish is to compare the actual results of an organization with the standards that were set prior to the implementation. So comparison of expected results with actual results. And this involves an activity where there is a measure of the actual performance of the organization, and this is juxtaposed with the results that are achieved against the expected outcomes, which are usually defined by the strategic plans. And usually there is likely to be a discrepancy or a variation. The degree of this discrepancy or variation will determine whether the strategy is working as expected. For that reason, we can say the strategy is effective. Now, if the actual performance is far below the standards that were set as far as performance outcomes are concerned, then on that basis, we can say the strategy was ineffective. And a number of reasons may culminate to explain why some of these outcomes may occur. And particularly when a strategy is said to be effective, following the evaluation, it becomes necessary to sustain all the activities and roles that are currently being played. But if the reverse is true, wherein the standards that have been set is far above the actual performance records that are being recorded, then it becomes necessary for corrective actions to be institutionalized. And this may require a number of action plans, ranging from re-engineering or restructuring the organizational structure. If it may also require the reallocating of organizational resources. It may also require sometimes laying incompetent and lazy workers. It may require deleting some layers that are redundant in the system and, for that matter, inefficient to maintain. So the outcome of this comparison will determine the specific action to utilize. Then the third activity that is associated with strategy evaluation also involves taking a corrective action to ensure that performance conforms with plans. So following the comparison of the expected results with the actual results, or the actual performance of the organization with the standards that has been set as far as the organizational performance is concerned, it may be right to take some corrective actions to ensure that the organization is able to come back on track. And some of these corrective actions are relevant because it wouldn't make rational or economic sense when managers have to sit down for a particular calendar year to come to an end before they realize that all their actions and initiatives were not yielding fruitful results, which means as much as possible, the comparison aspect of the strategy evaluation should inform them to be proactive in either realigning, readjusting, or refining their tactics that are being implemented, so that at the end of the day, some of these revisions can ensure that the objectives are necessarily achieved. So that is by way of explaining what strategy evaluation entails and the three basic activities that it strives to also accomplish. Generally speaking, it will be a Herculean task for me to speculate or claim that one can convincingly demonstrate that a particular strategy is the best, or a particular strategy can guarantee that when it is implemented, it will work. Now, I am being much cautious with my choice of words here as far as the outcome of, or the prospects of a given strategy is concerned, because the formulation of a strategic plan is informed by a lot of factors within and without the organization. But once strategic plans are rolled out and the business environment begins to also metamorphose, you will realize that you are likely to be chasing after a wild goose. And for that reason, some of your initial intentions that were designed to facilitate the attainment of your long-term objectives may no longer become realistic. So for that reason, you cannot be very much confident or complacent that a given strategy that has been formulated can in no unreserved terms guarantee that it will work. So Richard Ramford has offered 4 criteria that can be utilized to evaluate a given strategy in order to identify its strengths and weaknesses, and on that basis, discern whether it can assist in guaranteeing that when it is implemented, it will yield fruitful results. And these 4 criteria are what we have on our screen in a form of a matrix. So the first quadrant borders on the degree to which the the strategy is able to yield consistent results. That is consistency. So the consistency criterion seeks to evaluate whether the various elements of the strategy are aligned and mutually reinforcing. And that means that a strategy should not have conflicting or incompatible actions that are working against each other. For instance, last week we learned that a strategy should inform the structure of an organization, such that if at the point of implementation you have an organizational structure that does not match the strategy that is going to be implemented, then you will have an ineffective structure in place, and that will not augur well for the fruitful implementation of the strategy. So the same can be said about the allocation of resources, the prioritization of decision-making and business unit areas. As much as possible, there is supposed to be consistency across all these elements that are supposed to come together for the strategy to be implemented. For that reason, consistency criterion ensures that all parts of the organization are moving in the same direction towards achieving the long-term objectives of the company. It shouldn't be a situation where the structure will be going one direction and the strategy will also be going another direction, whilst the mission and vision are also heading towards another direction. As much as possible, there should be a synchrony of all the key elements that are supposed to come together for the strategy to be successful. The second criterion, as far as Richard Rummelt is concerned, is that of consonance. And the consonance criterion of strategy evaluation suggests that there is the need to examine whether a given strategy fits well with its external business environment and the extent to which the strategy is pretty much responsive to changes in this external environment. Which is to say that following the implementation of a given strategy, we should have in mind that the business environment is constantly changing. And so all the information that were utilized through the external factor evaluatory metrics to inform the strategy formulation may no longer be relevant. In the same vein, it is possible that some important factors were hitherto not considered, but they are currently at the center stage of organizational activities, which means there is the need for all these changes that are occurring in the external environment to be recalibrated into the strategic plan and eventually the strategy that is being implemented. So the consonance criterion essentially involves an attempt to assess whether the strategy makes sense given the current and expected future conditions of the business environment in conjunction with other facets such as the markets where the organization is plying its trade in, the industry-wide competitive forces, how the economy of the country is doing, and any other factors which may found much salience in the external environments. Then the third criterion, which Richard Rummelt also suggests, borders on feasibility of the strategy. So to what extent, when we talk about feasibility, we are essentially looking at the extent to which a strategy can be successfully implemented, given the organization's capabilities and resources. So we are bringing our attention to the internal aspect of the organization, the current capabilities and resources that are available. Does it stand an opportunity to help the organization flourish in achieving its long-term aspirations within the stipulated time? If that is, if the answer to this question is yes, then it means that the strategy is feasible as far as this criterion of evaluation is concerned. For that reason, the feasibility criterion of strategy evaluation strives to peruse an organization to determine whether it has the necessary skills, innovation, resources, or competencies in order to execute the strategy effectively within the designated time frame. Then the fourth criterion that has been put forth by Richard Ramels, as far as strategy evaluation is concerned, also hovers around advantage. So to what extent can the pursuit of the strategy assist the said organization to achieve not only competitive advantage, but sustainable competitive advantage? So the advantage criterion considers whether the strategy will allow the organization to differentiate itself from its rivals or achieve a superior performance in the industry where it is plying its trade. So, in a nutshell, although it cannot be guaranteed that a given strategy will is quite promising to help an organization achieve its long-term aspirations. Evaluating the strategy following implementation along these criterions can afford one to discern whether it is an effective one or not. Now, the strategy evaluation criteria. These are the explanations for the various criterion that are embedded in Richard Ramels' evaluation criteria. So all the explanations that I was providing can be found here. When you go, you take your time to look at them. The current dispensation of strategy evaluation is perceived by most practitioners and scholars to be quite difficult than it used to be because of a number of factors, some of which are found on my screen. So they contend that strategy evaluation is becoming more or increasingly difficult with the passage of time because of some reasons, such as the idea that world economies are now, the world economies used to be more stable and predictable in the past as compared to now that it is quite more volatile and unpredictable. Other reasons why it is also becoming quite difficult to evaluate the efficacy of a strategy also borders on the notion that product life cycles and product development cycles used to be more predictable in the past, unlike now that it is less predictable. And in the past, research also suggests that there were fewer rivalries or competitors to a firm's operations. And there were also fewer foreign companies available to be competing with existing firms in the domestic environment. But the situation now as a result of open market economy or the free market economy suggests that once you are able to meet the conditions that are set out by a government regulating trade and commerce in a given country, you are at liberty to enter into such businesses, and which makes it quite difficult for individuals that will be evaluating a strategy to preempt some of these unforeseen contingencies. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So it's
Now-
your name that comes on it.
So my name.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, then I think you guys are
You
using.
can see us.
So these are some of the reasons that are necessitating for the difficulty with which strategy evaluation has now become. Now, the process of evaluating a strategy. As we've learned so far, strategy evaluation is very much necessary for all organizations, irrespective of their sizes and kind or the industry where they apply their trade. And with respect to the process of evaluating strategies, it first of all involves the attempt that is made to initiate managerial questioning of expectations and assumptions, thereby reviewing objectives and values and also stimulating creativity. So when managers are employed in terms of questioning expectations and assumptions, the suggestion here is that strategy evaluation must firstly prompt managers to critically assess whether the assumptions made about the market where the organization is plying its trade in, the customer behavior of that particular industry, the competitive actions, and internal capabilities are still valid. So essentially, managers are supposed to interrogate the happenings that informed the strategy implementation to verify whether it is still valid. And this will encourage them to change any deep-seated beliefs that they may be fixated about. And for that matter, they may end up considering new perspectives. Now, still on the first points, it also suggests that there is a need to review objectives and values. So managers are supposed to be reviewing objectives and values as part of the evaluation exercise. And this involves revisiting the strategic objectives that were set for the organization to ensure that the objectives are still relevant and aligned with the organization's missions and values. And by so doing, if the business environment is changing outside the current pursuits in terms of the mission and values of the organization, then the necessary corrective actions can be instigated. And that is what it implies when we say that whenever there are discrepancies or shifts in priorities, particularly on the part of the organization, then the managers that are embarking on this strategy evaluation exercise will be prompted to make the requisite adjustments in order to align the strategy of the organization with the objectives that are being pursued. And still on the first bullet, another component is that it should stimulate creativity in generating alternatives, which suggests that strategy evaluation should not only assess the current strategy that has been implemented, but it must also aspire creative thinking, particularly on the part of the managers that are doing the evaluation, to generate alternative strategies, or if you like, contingencies that can be felt that the organization can fall upon as and when it becomes necessary for them to switch, particularly when the current strategies are struggling to help the organization progress. Strategy evaluation as part of the process also involves evaluating strategies on a continuous basis and establishing benchmarks. So the evaluation of strategy is said to be a continuous activity, but not a one-time managerial activity. And if you read the text of strategic management to a higher level, you will realize it is not only continuous, but it is equally iterative, in the sense that rather than evaluating strategies periodically, such as at the end of the year or at the end of the time horizon for the long-term objectives to be achieved, which may be 5 years or 2 years' time, it is imperative to continually evaluate an ongoing strategy that has been implemented. And this can be achieved through monitoring the strategy to verify whether the execution is progressing as expected and whether the outcomes that are being derived from the strategy implementation is at par with the standard that were set. For that reason, this process associated with strategy evaluation allows for a timely and proactive identification of critical issues that can undermine the success of the strategy. It can also identify possible opportunities which the organization can seize in order to improve their chances of excelling in implementing that particular strategy. So by evaluating strategies on a continuous basis and as establishing benchmarks, it enables an organization to identify areas for change and quickly introduce corrective actions that can help the firm adjust accordingly. And when continuous evaluation is also fed into the strategic evaluation process, it will thereafter facilitate the establishment of yardsticks, or if you like, benchmarks, against which the progress of the strategy implementation can be measured. And so these benchmarks are going to serve as the reference point or the yardstick that will help us gauge the success or otherwise of the strategy. And lastly, successful strategies also end up combining patience with prompt corrective actions. It ends up combining patience with prompt corrective actions, which is to suggest that for a strategy to be successful, it requires a lot of patience, because achieving the strategic objective does not come overnight, and it often takes quite some time. And this may involve the degree to which one will persistently stick to a particular strategic direction and allow ample time for several initiatives to be tested to see whether they can yield favorable results or otherwise. Now, in as much as patience is very much important for strategies to become successful, it is equally important for strategy evaluation to emphasize on prompt corrective actions, because it is these prompt corrective actions that will necessitate and reveal that will necessitate the right outcome or expectations to be realized. So if external conditions are changing or internal capabilities of the organization are currently not aligned with the intended objective that is being pursued, then swiftly it will be more appropriate to make the necessary adjustments in order to maintain the organizational goal. So this is a matrix that strives to compare the sort of action plans or corrective actions that can be implemented whenever a comparison of an organization's internal strategic position as well as their external strategic position and their chances of achieving stated objectives are concerned. So it is a matrix, and so when you do the permutations, several outcomes are possible. And depending on the answer that is offered to each of the questions under the matrix, then the appropriate results are also followed up. So, for instance, when the organization perceives that there haven't been major changes in the firm's internal strategic position, and there hasn't also been major changes as far as the firm's external strategic position is concerned. And when these two outcomes are compared with the satisfactory nature to which the firm is achieving its objectives, then it will require that a corrective action is taken. So if you pick the second one, have major changes occurred in the firm's internal positions? The answer is yes. Have major changes occurred in the firm's external strategic position? The answer is yes. And has the firm progressed satisfactorily towards achieving its stated objective? The answer is yes. It's still required that you take a corrective action, because this is the situation where the internal strategic position as well as the external strategic position have all changed, which means although you are progressing towards the attainment of your strategic objectives, which were stated, it cannot be sustainable. So you will have to take a corrective action in order to meet the changes that are occurring in your internal strategic position as well as external strategic position. It is only when there are no changes in your internal strategic position as well as external strategic position of the firm, but you are cardinally making enviable progress towards achieving the state of objectives that you are expected to continue the present strategies you are working with. Apart from that, under any circumstances, whether the changes are occurring only with respect to your internal strategic position or external strategic position, or with the attainment of your stated objectives, if there are some changes along any of these lines, then it requires that you take some corrective actions to address it. So the matrix on your screen strives to summarize the three strategy evaluation activities in terms of key questions that should be addressed, and also in terms of alternative answers to those questions and appropriate actions for an organization to take in order to mitigate the complications that the organization is confronted with. So a strategy evaluation framework. It is just like the preceding matrix I presented. And this particular framework suggests that reviewing the underlying basis of an organization strategy could be approached by conducting a revised external factor evaluation matrix and an internal factor evaluation matrix. But following the conduct of the revised external and internal factor evaluation matrix, it is important for you to compare them with the existing one. So don't forget, at the time that strategy was being formulated and implemented, we conducted some form of IE matrix, be it external and internal factor evaluatory matrix. So during the evaluation, it is also important for you to compare the initial factor evaluatory matrix that was conducted as far as external and internal is concerned with the revised one. Now, it is important to compare it with the revised one because the revised version of the evaluatory matrix will help you to identify aspects of the business environment, be it internal and external, that may now be very much relevant, but was not captured in the initial one. So if after the comparisons of the revised factor evaluatory matrix and the initial one, you realize that there isn't much significant difference between the two, then you proceed to the next stage. But if there is a significant difference, then you will have to quickly take a corrective action. And this corrective action will have to be forged around the areas where you have identified discrepancies as far as the internal and external factor evaluatory matrix of the revised one as well as the initial one is concerned. But if you compare the outcome of the internal and external factor evaluatory matrix, and you realize that there is no difference between the initial one and the revised one, then you proceed to the second stage, which is to now measure the performance of the organization. And by measuring the performance of the organization, an attempt is made to consider not only the financial performance, but also the non-financial ones to determine whether the standards that were set for the organization to achieve are different from the actual performance. So if there is a significant difference between the performance standards that were set and the actual performance that are being recorded now, then it means a corrective action have to be taken to proactively remedy the discrepancies that are unraveling. But if there is no significant difference between the actual performance and the standards that were set, then it means the strategy is on the right trajectory. And for that matter, you will have to continue the current course of action. So that is the explanation behind this strategy evaluation framework. In an attempt to analyze a given strategy or review it to verify whether it is effective or not, the analysis should seek to address a number of questions, including the ones that you have on my screen. So the answer you profess to these questions will help us know whether the strategy has a stronger base and it should be maintained, or the strategy is no longer relevant and it requires some level of modification. Now, measuring organizational performance. So organizational performance essentially borders on the extent to which the organization is excelling in terms of achieving the standards or the feats that it strives to achieve, given all the resources and capabilities that were allocated for its pursuit. Measuring organizational performance may include the comparison of expected results, which is the standards, to actual results, which are the actual performance of the organization, and to discern whether there are variations, deviations, or discrepancies across these two streams. It may also require the evaluation of individual performance, because the performance of individuals in the organization aggregates to form the total performance of a given organization. So whenever organizational performance is examined, it helps us to determine the extent to which progress is being made towards the attainment of an organization's objectives. So, generally speaking, when strategies are assessing an organizational performance, particularly they are utilizing quantitative approaches to the assessment of an organizational performance, then they end up utilizing 3 critical comparisons as a basis for determining how well or how unwell an organization is doing. And the first one involves comparing the firm's performance over different time periods. So this can be mathematically or graphically done using what we call the uninterrupted time series, whereby the performance of an organization along different years are plotted on a graph to see the trajectory as to whether the organization is performing above average, below average, or on average. And that one can give you a better appreciation of how well the firm is doing. So when we say we are utilizing the comparison of a firm's performance over different time periods, it simply suggests that a comparison is made to analyze the firm's performance metrics. And so if we are using the financial metrics to discern a firm's performance, then we may be talking about sales volume, profitability, return on investment, and the likes. And these specific performance metrics will be analyzed or compared across different time periods. So if you are able to get a number of years, then you can easily draw you can easily use the time series to plot it on a Cartesian plane. And that can be analyzed on time horizons such as quarterly, annually, or every 2 years, depending on how these metrics are being summated. So once you are able to compare the firm's performance over different time periods, what are some of the benefits? That action alone can help the firm to assess whether it is improving or it is declining with the passage of time. And this can also help them to identify trends in their performance. So For instance, under what economic conditions does the firm perform very well, and under what economic conditions does the firm perform abysmally? This comparison of firm performance over different time periods can help you to discern some of these things. A typical example can be found in a situation where a comparison of the sales growth of a firm is made as far as their current year is concerned in comparison with their previous years to determine whether the firm's market position is either strengthening or weakening. So when you use a time series to plot the sales growth rate of a firm in terms of their current year and that of the past year, you can easily visualize and also claim whether the firm's is progressing or retrogressing. The second approach may involve comparing the firm's performance to competitors. So that is what we call benchmarking. Comparing the firm's performance to competitors. And this may involve comparing key performance indicators, such as the profit margin that is being chalked by the firm, the customer satisfaction or customer retention capacity of the firm, the market share that is occupied or being enjoyed by the firm. And once you are able to juxtapose a firm's performance on these metrics in conjunction with that of competitors, then it will help managers in the organization to understand the organization's relative competitive position within the industry where it is operating. So after such comparisons, if a given firm's profit margin or sales volume or customer retention capacity is lower than the main competitors' indicators, then it might indicate some level of inefficiency that require a swift action to mitigate the situation, thereby improving the competitive level of the company. Then the third criterion is by comparing the firm's performance to industry averages. So here you are not only interested in your competitors, but you are interested in the industry-wide averages. And this is important because sometimes when you are fixated with your competitors alone, you may lose sight of the fact that the industry-wide averages may also be suggesting different pointers for you to follow. And so by comparing the firm's performance to industry averages, it helps the organization in question to derive insights into how well the company is performing relative to the broader industry where the broader industry standards that are available. And this will allow strategic managers in the company to identify areas where the firm may be outperforming or underperforming compared to these industry-wide standards. So sometimes the comparison of a firm's performance with that of competitors may be suggesting that the firm is not doing so well. But if you look at the industry-wide averages and you juxtapose that with the sort of resources that you are utilizing as well as that of your rivals, you may realize you are not bad after all. So that is why it is important to also do this industry-wide average comparison in addition to the comparison that is done at competitive level or benchmarking. So these three comparisons, in essence, can be said to help strategic managers to identify the strengths and weaknesses that are associated with an organization's internal happenings, as well as the opportunities that can be seized upon for improvement. And of course, potential threats that may be posed by the competitors and the industry standards as they prevail. So once you have done the requisite comparisons of firm's performance over time, and you have also juxtaposed the firm's performance with that of competitors, as well as the firm's performance with industry averages, it may become apparent that the firm is deviating from all the standards that it's trying to achieve. And for that matter, the necessary corrective actions must be introduced. So corrective actions simply refers to the measures or the introductions that can be injected into an organization's in terms of pursuing its strategy to make sure that they are able to stay on track towards the attainment of their long-term aspirations. And some specific corrective actions that may be institutionalized when the outcome of some of these comparisons suggests that there is more room for improvements include: one, altering the firm's structure, which is something we learned just last week, that when the strategy of a firm does not sit well with the structure that is also available and in place, it is important for the structure to be either re-engineered or restructured in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness of organizations' operations. The second one may also require the replacement of one or more key individuals whose contribution to organizations is negligible. So if individuals, after offering them an opportunity to redeem their image, having performed abysmally, are still retarding the progress of the organization, then such people may have to be jettisoned. Then the next corrective action that can also be utilized to mitigate a strategy from deviating from achieving a standard is to utilize some form of diversification. So you may end up divesting a division which may not be currently yielding fruitful results. And this diversification will be determined by the peculiar circumstances that the firm is confronting. So it may go the related or unrelated diversification. You may also have to alter the firm's mission as well as vision, especially when current evidence from the revised external factor evaluation metrics and the internal factor evaluation metrics suggests that the vision that was forged earlier on is no longer realistic or relevant. So you may have to alter the firm's vision and mission in order to come back on track. You may also have to revise the objectives, alter the strategies by falling on the contingent ones or the attractive alternative strategies that were unbundled when strategies were being formulated. You may also have to devise new policies that will sit well with the current current behavior in order to ward off counterproductive behavior, but at the same time, sustain productive behaviors. Install new performance incentives so that it will incentivize individuals to strive for greatness, particularly those that surround the attainment of the long-term aspirations of the organization. And so individuals are expected to be compensated or rewarded for excellence, particularly those that are in line with the strategic direction of the organization. And individuals are not expected to be incentivized for mere possession of some academic credentials. It should be in line with contribution to the attainment of the strategic imperatives. You may also have to raise capital through stocks or some form of debt exchange programs in order to rejuvenate the financial health and the financial muscle of the firm by injecting those capital that will now be generated. You may have to add or terminate some salespersons or employees or managers whose contribution to organizational success is not appreciable. You may also have to allocate resources differently. So the bottom line is that a number of corrective actions are available for firms to explore when they verify that there is a discrepancy between the actual performance of the firm and the standards that have been set. And also there is a discrepancy between the initial vision, mission, and objective that was forged and the current predicaments of the firm. So when some of these gaps are identified, some of these corrective actions can be utilized to remedy the situation. So we are now going to consider some specific tools that can be utilized in conducting strategy evaluation and control. And the first one is what we call the balance scorecard. The balance scorecard. So the balance scorecard was developed by Robert Kaplan and David Norton in the 1990s as a tool to facilitate comprehensive evaluation of a given strategy, particularly in line with how the organization is performing following the implementation of the strategy, by taking cognizance of the financial and the non-financial performance of the firm. So the balance scorecard derived its name from the perceived need to for firms to balance their financial measures with the non-financial measures. And most often than not, firms become fixated with utilizing financial measures to determine how well their firm is performing at the expense of the non-financial measures, such as the quality of product or service they are delivering, how well they are able to retain customers, and the like. So when you do that by becoming fixated about your financial measures, such as profitability, sales volume, and the percentage of market share that you command, you are not going to be in a position to get a better appreciation of how well the firm is doing. So the balance scorecard tends to balance the finances and the non-finances aspects of an organization as far as their performance is concerned. And it does this by defining the specific objectives and measures in each of these perspectives, be it the financial and the non-financial, by helping a firm to align their day-to-day operations with some of these strategic goals. So all that I'm trying to say is that when we say we are utilizing balance scorecard to assess a firm's performance or to evaluate a firm's performance, what that means is that an attempt is made to compare how well the firm's is doing in terms of its financial performance, be it profitability or volume of sales as compared to its non-financial performance, such as how they are able to produce quality goods and services, how they are able to serve customers substantially and all that. And it strives to do this by answering a number of questions, including, is the firm continually improving and creating value along measures such as innovation, technology, leadership, product quality, operational processes, and efficiency, and so on. And this will border on the non-financial measures that are associated with the balance scorecard. Then another question that also takes a center stage as far as the balance scorecard is concerned is the firm sustaining and even improving its core competencies and competitive advantages? And how satisfied are the firm customers? So in addition to utilizing the financial metrics, some of these non-financial ones can easily be rolled out to help the firm balance how well they are doing financially and non-financially. Then characteristics of an effective evaluative system. An effective evaluative system or evaluation system is a system that is able and adequate enough to determine whether there is a discrepancy between the actual performance of an organization and the standards that were set by the organization. And it is able to do this exercise dispassionately but objectively. A number of characteristics exist to demonstrate that a particular strategy evaluation system is effective. And this includes the extent to which the strategic evaluation activities are economical. So when the evaluation process or activities are such that it doesn't overwhelm the evaluators with so much information, and it is not also economical or scarce with too little information, then for that reason we can say the evaluation system is effective. Then another one is that when the activities that are embedded in the evaluation system is also meaningful, in the sense that the specific actions and initiatives that are carried out are all relevant and valid, such that if, for instance, we are measuring an organizational performance, the sort of questions or indicators that are utilized should be something that actually measures organizational performance. It shouldn't be about something that is alien to the performance metrics of the organization. In the same vein, assuming the organization has its target customers to be students, all right? If the organization has its target customers to be students, and the evaluation system is inquiring from non-students as far as the efficacy of the teaching methods is concerned, then under such circumstances, we will say that the activities that are accumulating in the evaluation system is not meaningful. So it should, as much as possible, relate to the core objective that the firm is striving to achieve. And it should also provide timely information such that the time can be utilized to embark on some corrective actions that will ensure that the firm does not deviate from the standards that it is striving to achieve. It should also be designed to provide a true picture of what is happening. And that is what it means when we say the evaluation system should be devoid of personal and individual opinions, but it should rather be done using hardcore objective information. And lastly, the activity should not dominate decisions, such that it should foster mutual understanding, trust, and common sense, wherein they will be mutually supporting each other. So when it gets to a point where the activities are rather dominating the decision, it means that when the strategy was being formulated, adequate time was not taken to settle on a formidable strategy. Contingency planning. So the basic premise of any good strategy or any strategic management activity is that firms strive to be proactive, and for that matter, they plan in ways to deal with both favorable and unfavorable events before they occur. Which is to say that organizations are expected to have in place a well thought through or prepared contingency plans for both favorable and unfavorable events, so that as some of these events fall into their right quadrants, then the right options as far as these contingencies can be switched or operated. Contingency plans can be explained as alternative plans or alternative strategic options that can be put into effect if certain key events do not occur as expected. So the bottom line is that when strategies are being formulated on the strategic table, it is important for alternative but attractive options to be made available. And whenever the outcome of the evaluation exercise suggests that the current plan which is in place is no longer suitable for the attainment of the standard steps, then it becomes imperative to quickly switch onto these contingency plans. And the contingency plans are usually viable under circumstances which may have not been properly expected to ensue during the formulation of the strategy. It is called contingency for a reason. It's contingent because most of the things that may be happening at that point in time might have not been anticipated. And even when it was anticipated, the way to handle it might have not been featured into the strategy that is rolled out. And so contingency planning suggests that in as much as we are able to formulate strategies that we believe and hope they can help an organization achieve enviable results, when the business environment starts shifting and changing, it is important to quickly adopt some of the best case or worst case scenarios that were envisioned for the organization to thrive under such circumstances. And these are some of the questions that can be answered in order to help an organization come out with contingency plans successfully. And these are the indicators of an effective contingency planning outcomes. So later on, look at them. Now, auditing. Strategy evaluation is also said to mirror the aspirations and spirit behind auditing. And generally speaking, a frequently used tool in strategy evaluation is to audit the system. And in the context of strategy evaluation, auditing can be said to align with the process of systematically assessing and verifying the effectiveness and the implementation of strategic initiatives. So to what extent can you say that following the verification of a given strategy's implementation, it is effective in pursuing all the initiatives that it aspires to achieve? So those of you that are doing accounting, you might have encountered this definition as far as auditing is concerned, that it is a systematic process of objectively obtaining and evaluating evidence regarding assertions about economic actions and events to ascertain the degree of correspondence between the assertions and the established criteria and communicating results to its interested users or stakeholders. So when we say it is a systematic process, it means that auditing involves a structured and sequential approach to gather evidence. And in an attempt to gather this evidence, a lot of effort is made to evaluate it against established criteria. So in line with strategy evaluation, just as auditing is done, strategy evaluation is also said to require systematic examination of the strategy components. And when I say strategy components, I'm referring to strategy formulation, strategy implementation, and the outcomes of the strategy. And all these are done objectively. So when we say you have to systematically process, when it's a systematic process of objectively obtain information, the objectivity here means that strategy evaluation should be conducted with with an objective mind that ensure that assessments are based on factual, hardcore information rather than personal opinions or individual biases. Then in terms of obtaining and evaluating evidence, in strategy evaluation, evidence might include financial data, performance metrics, or customer feedback. And these evidence are expected to be evaluated to determine how well the strategy is performing and whether it is achieving its intended goal. Now, these are also expected to be compared with established criteria. And that means that it is important to compare it is important to compare the current outcomes of the evaluation with the standards or the objectives that were set, particularly the key performance indicators, or maybe industry market benchmarks or industry averages, to verify whether the firm is excelling. And all these take part and parcel of auditing as far as strategy auditing is concerned. And last but most important component is that there is the need to communicate results to interested users or stakeholders. So after conducting an audit of an organization's strategy that has been implemented, it is important for the findings or the results to be communicated to stakeholders who may have interest in the organization's financial health and position. So the results of assessing a given strategy, a given strategy's effectiveness or performance are expected to be communicated to the relevant stakeholders, such as the senior management, who may rely on such information to embark on a decision to either expand or diversify. Now, this information may also be relevant to other important stakeholders, such as investors. Because if a firm is excelling in terms of its performance, then such an audit and such communication to the investors will mean that when they pump their money into the company, they will get a lot of returns for their investments, and particularly for employees, because employees are cardinal stakeholders of an organization in the sense that it is the organization that pay them to also cater for their needs in return for their assiduous contribution towards the attainment of organizational outcomes. So the communicating aspects of an auditing of an organizational strategy, as far as evaluation is concerned, is very much important. And these are some challenges confronting strategic management in the 21st century, which you can consider. And you also have the guidelines for effective strategic management available for you to consider on your own. And that brings us to